Polyamory, courage to embrace what God has joined together. Welcome to the Priceless Podcast. Welcome everyone, all dear listeners and viewers, to a new episode of the Priceless Podcast. And this podcast is made again in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. And I'm so happy that this partnership is continuing. We are talking about polyamory. And we have two guests, and it's Franz from the Netherlands and Olga from Estonia. Hello, my dear guests. How are you today? And welcome to the Priceless Podcast.
Hello, Michael. Good to see you.
How soothing to have more than one guest for this topic.
Yeah, it's such a big topic that I needed to have two guests. It's not possible to cover just by one person. Before we start, I want to tell our viewers and listeners that because there is two of you, this might be a little bit longer and that we might that I might edit it into two parts. So if there are two parts, you can, after this, you can watch the second part. And now I would like to ask you to say a few words about yourselves for the guests or for the what guests? What am I talking about? Of course, the listeners and viewers to get to know you a little bit better. What would you tell them? What would you like them to know about you?
I don't know.
Yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid I talk a lot. And I have two names. So my official name is female. It's Olga Gerasimenko. And that is the name that my counseling clients know me by. And quite some knowledge about polyamory comes from counseling. I counsel quite some people in polyamorous relationships and polyamorous parents. And my name that a lot of my friends and significant others use is Lyoshka, which is a male name from my childhood. And this is significant as well because, of course, a big part of my knowledge comes from my personal life experience and from the involvement in the community, which is quite diverse, as I'm Russian, living in Estonia, and quite active internationally. So I communicate in 3 languages about polyamory. And those voices from behind me are the voices of my dog, who wants to join us very much. But she is even more talkative than I am.
I'm sorry. It was a little bit too much to have one more guest. So just say I'm sorry to your dog.
I will.
So, Franz, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Franz. My full name is Franz Blokhuis. I'm from Amsterdam, from the Netherlands. I'm 28 years old. I work in retail and I graduated from a master's in gender studies. So I like to occupy myself with projects that revolve around social issues, social questions. I do a lot of photography in my free time, or maybe it's also kind of work. And I don't have a professional background in polyamory like Lyoshka, but I do practice it, so I guess that's why I'm here. And I did a workshop on it for the European Forum of LGBT groups earlier this year, and that's where we met, and that's where we had our first conversations about this topic. And I think it's very nice to continue the conversation today with you guys.
Yeah, and that was actually my idea back then, because I was part of that workshop and I actually wanted more people to hear about this topic. And I know that people do have questions and want to understand better, and this is what this podcast is for. But before we go into this topic of polyamory, could you share with us what your sexual identity is and your gender identity?
I came out as gay 7 years ago. And throughout those years, I've started to identify more as queer. I think for me, the word gay implies kind of a fixed identity where a man is attracted to only men. And one of my partners at the moment is a non-binary person. So for me, I really like the word queer because it sort of captures that fluidity, and it captures what cannot be captured. So I identify as queer, and as for my gender identity, I don't really strongly identify as a man, but I don't mind being seen as one. I use he, him pronouns, but I'm also okay with other pronouns. It's all very vague and very fluid, which I think actually has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about later on, which is relationships and being related to other people. So in my love life and in my relationships, gender isn't really much of a thing. We don't really have these roles in our queer relationships that we need to live up to. Me and my partners, we are just ourselves. We paint our nails and we wear heels, and we don't. And yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting answer. Lyoshka, what would you say?
I'm so delighted to hear Franz's long answer, because I also like to speak long. And we have this.
So, dear listeners and viewers, this is gonna be a 2-part podcast. Maybe
Definitely,
even 3. We'll see.
There was no other chance, Michael, because all people know that polyamorous people have this one real serious kink we share. It's a kink for communication, which is like a big exaggeration and a joke, but it's so much there. And I was trying to think about a concise word about myself. And the word I came up with was open to life, open to love, open to faith, because faith is also important for me. In this talk, especially in the Christian talk about polyamory, I'm gender fluid, very much. I use male pronouns. I believe my looks are pretty feminine, and I have 2 names, male and female. So it's about me being myself, about me being comfortable rather than tending to some specific gender. I have been in my life pan-romantic and pansexual. I have loved, and I do love in my life, people of multiple genders, admire their very different gender identities and gender expressions lived. For more than a decade, I identify as a polyamorous person. I have multiple mutually loving relationships with people, which are very differently framed. So it's like really pretty fluid as well. And they don't have to be romantic relationships to be mutually loving. I think, like, also speaking about faith, it's important for me that maybe also, like in my love life, I didn't look for something specific, but I just heard God when I was 12. And then I wanted very much to get baptized, and I got baptized in the Orthodox Church a year later. I was very happy for that, and I still stay committed very much to my Orthodox background. But being strongly committed, I'm not married to this church. And I have at least 3 more strong commitments to the Leipzig, Halle and World Faith community, to the Russian-speaking community we are right here, and to the Forum, Eastern European and Western European Forum communities. So it's pretty much fluid as well. Polyam in all senses.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up your faith background. Maybe if you can add something about that yourself, Franz, and tell us what is your faith background.
Yes, my faith background is I was brought up in a Dutch Reformed setting where my father is actually a pastor. So he works in the Dutch Reformed Church. And throughout my entire childhood, while I was going to the church every Sunday twice, up until I would say my 20th, somewhere around that age, where I moved out and also decided that I no longer really wanted to go to a physical church. And I always kind of compare myself to Obelix from Asterix and Obelix. I don't know if you know him. He's the strong guy who fell into the pot of how do you call it?
Magic potion of the potion.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think as a son of a pastor, you kind of relate to that. And I wanted to see what else is out there. Right now I do feel connected to the Christian tradition a lot, but not in the same way that I was brought up. So I don't really go to church anymore. I don't really pray to God, but I also wouldn't say that I don't believe in God. For me, it's all very abstract. And I think I find a lot of peace in not having all the answers and also not needing to find all the answers.
That actually sounds very good, like that you are in a good place, because I think that people of faith very often think that they know it all and that they have all the answers. That's encouraging, when people say, I don't know I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about polyamory? And Lyoshka, you can start with this question. What would you tell people polyamory is?
That's very funny. You say it's so beautiful when you don't have the answers, and then you start off, the next question is what polyamory is. I definitely only have a metaphorical question, and I hope that Franz, as a gender scientist, has maybe a more concise one. But I believe you can find more concise questions and answers, also online or in the literature. If I'm staying very personal, then I think it's maybe what we have in the name of this podcast, the courage to join, to embrace what God has joined together, to keep faith to it, to not have ready-made answers about it and still live it. And for me, it is quite a courage to see the seeds of love that God has chosen to plant in my life. And sometimes it's not just the seeds, it's just, like if I use this plant analogy, I look back and think, this beautiful pine tree, it has just been there all the time, like 20 years. I only now discover it in all its splendor. Sometimes it happens like that. Making it visible, when you see it, when you discover it, you're making it visible to the other people. And then you sometimes just let it go, just let this seed of love land somewhere, fly somewhere. And sometimes you discuss with those people, is there a place in our lives, to take care of it, to somehow, grow it together? Or maybe you decide to grow it yourself because it's so important for you that you will grow it this way or other in your life. And that is how it looks for me. And of course, I think maybe what is distinctive about polyamory is having it in the open. And it's not just coming, from this feeling of love between you and somebody else, but maybe it's also a feeling of care for the relationships that this person is already having, that you are already having. It doesn't grow on itself, it grows somewhere in a garden, in a system, in an ecosystem. And that is a very important part for me as well. So it has respect, and it has this shared life and shared love with those other ecosystem beauties and miracles.
Thank you. Franz, how would you define polyamory?
Yeah, maybe for the listeners who are completely new to this, I can give a very short definition, which would be something like the practice of multiple romantic and possibly sexual relationships at the same time, so simultaneously. So being open to having multiple partners with the consent of those partners. So there's there's also, again, the key difference to what we would call cheating maybe, or, which is open communication and consensual partnership. And everyone who's involved is aware of the situation that they are in. And this can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. You can sort of draw your own polycule, if you will. So you can draw, for example, a triangle, which would be about 3 people who are in a relationship with the 3 of them. For me, my personal situation, if I were to draw it, which probably wouldn't do justice to my complex reality or my ecosystems, as Ljoska called them. But if I were to draw my situation, it would be something like a V, where it's me in the middle, and then my 2 partners are the 2 dots that connect, and then there's a V. And then, of course, they also have a connection in between them, but we don't call that a relationship, or they don't feel the need to call that a relationship. There's maybe something of a friendship, and they can definitely get along really well. And then, to make it more complex, it's actually not a V, but it's more of a cloud, because of course my partners also have people in their lives, and I have other people in my life that I feel strongly connected to. You can make it as complex as you want, basically. I think sometimes it helps to make these drawings, like, okay, what are the names and how are we connected to each other? And but then again, it always feels like it doesn't do justice to the complex reality that there is. Yeah, but for me, I always go back to this V, and that can also change in the future. I don't know what my next letter will be. Maybe it can also transform into an M or a W, where there's other people also involved. And then there's a lot more to say about it, of course, because there's a lot of different ways in which you then can approach having those relationships and navigating those different partnerships or relationships, and the needs and wishes of all the partners that are involved. And one relationship doesn't necessarily have to be the same as the other. Some relationships can be sexual, some can not be sexual, some can be more about emotional connection, some can be more about just living together or taking care of the same children together or of the same pet, sharing passions or hobbies or artistic projects or whatever. I look at all those relationships as sort of unique because all those people are unique. And it's also something that's fluid because these relationships and these people, they develop to something new. And it's always in motion, I would say. But that's for me how I look at it right now. Yeah.
So there is one question that comes out of this. I'm also trying to think, like, what might the listeners and viewers be interested in? So when you talk about sharing some interests, like, it's pretty clear to me when I think about romantic or sexual relationships, but when you talk about taking care of the same pet, or it sounds like a friendship. Is there a difference for you when you talk about polyamory, or is it the same?
Yeah, this is the whole thing. I think for me with polyamory, and what polyamory has taught me is to sort of embrace like the gray area that exists between friendship and romantic relationship. And I no longer really feel the need to categorize all the connections that I have in my life. And a lot of times that actually works really well. I don't need to sort of make a hierarchy of like, these people are relationships and then these are somehow less than, and that makes them just friends. I think, friendships are super important and they're not above or beneath relationships. But then for me also, it doesn't really matter anymore to make that clear distinction. I don't really feel the need to do that. Like I said, I just look at the people and I look at, okay, what do I share with you? What are my wants with you? What are my needs with you? Are those things mutual? Does it work together? If it works, okay, great, let's go. Let's celebrate this connection that we have. And I don't really, care about the label that I put on it, whether it's a relationship or a friendship. And I think the longer I think about what is the definition of a relationship, the more I struggle with finding an answer to that question. What is a relationship? I think everything is a relationship. I think you even have a relationship with your dentist because you see them once a year and they help you with your teeth, and then that's the relationship. And you also have a relationship with your neighbors and with your family and with all the people in your life. And then some of them are more intimate, some of them are closer to your heart probably. Some of them you see more often, but that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the intimacy. You can also be super intimate with someone that you only see like once a year, or maybe only through Zoom, like we are seeing each other right now. And then, that's your reality, I guess. That's your social life. And categorizing your social life. For me, it's no longer relevant, I would say. It does become relevant in difficult times. For example, last year during the lockdowns, where we sort of had to choose which people we were still going to see. And that was really hard for me, because then all of a sudden I was forced to make choices and to categorize and be like, okay, this person, when I see them, I'm going to give them a kiss. And this person, I'm just going to wave from 1.5 meters distance. And for me, that was really difficult, because I felt like I was, forced to create a way of dealing with each other that felt very unnatural to me, because I just want to be able to kiss everyone with consent. And not make those distinctions between like, oh, you are someone I kiss and you are not someone. It's and it doesn't mean that I kiss everybody. There's a lot of people in my life that I don't kiss, but with COVID I couldn't kiss all the people that I would normally kiss. I could only maybe kiss 2 people max.
What I hear is that you had to prioritize and choose, and you don't really like to and kind of choose like who is more important, which
exactly and I think that we are forced to do that in times of unusual circumstances and in times of scarcity, but I think my status quo, and I really want my sort of day-to-day life to be all about abundance and to be about not having to choose and not having to categorize and to just be free and be open and be authentic to the connection that there is with that person.
When I think about my pandemic experience, it was not even choosing who is more important. It was choosing like who is how much vulnerable and all this. And there were people who were deadly important to me, but who couldn't risk really, transmitting something for their elderly parents, for instance, or other very vulnerable close people. So I'm so much with Franz on the fluidity and not categorizing. And I remember the metaphor that a friend has shared with me when we were talking about polyamory years ago. And they identified as asexual at that time. And they were asked, as an asexual person, do you even have a relationship? Something like that. And they answered, thousands of them. And that is so much a metaphor close to my heart as well. And I tried to do a very amateur statistics on my Facebook. I asked people who consider themselves to be polyamorous, and in polyamorous relationships, how many relationships do they have? Can they tell? And the majority of the people couldn't tell. They said, I will describe rather than count. And that speaks to me as well, pretty much. And there were also quite some people who said, I'm polyamorous and I'm in a monoamorous relationship right now. And this was also quite significant for me, or don't have a relationship. So it's more like about ethics maybe, and not counting so much. And speaking of this distinction between friendship and relationship, I also don't have the distinction. But I think that some relationships based on interests are like, they are there, but they don't have to be there. But some relationships, they need to be there. They have to be there. They are dear to us. And that's maybe kind of this relationship measure somehow in my life. Relationship that is important for me and that needs to be there for the sake of the person rather than for the sake of the interest.
Before we continue, we'll take a short break. We'll be back in 30-ish seconds, so stay with us.
I'm thinking about different ways how to engage more people in supporting this podcast. And some people said, be more aggressive. Hey you! Support this podcast or I will... Well, I tried, but it didn't work that well. So if you want to become a supporter of this podcast, please click one of the links in the podcast description.
One question that comes to my mind is, because I am stuck in this monogamous mindset. So I'm interested, what happens, and did it ever happen to you, or this is just not a question, if there are several people that express a need for you to spend time with you, or you express a need to someone and that person doesn't have the time for you? How does that work?
Ljoska already mentioned that we all share the kink for communication. And I think if that person already expresses their need for quality time, that's already a very good start. And I think there's a lot more possible than a lot of people like to think. So as long as we communicate openly and as long as we are open-minded and flexible with our agendas, a lot of things can be arranged. Yeah, for me, I never really find myself in situations where I feel like I don't have, where I feel like I need, for example, more hours in a day or more days in a week than I already have. I can manage pretty well with the time that I have. Maybe it's also because I don't work full time, and I'm happy that I don't actually. But yeah, I think it's a lot about the way we choose to organize our time and the time that we spend on things like work and social life. Of course, there are moments where there are clashes of interest. For example, I don't know if two people want to go with you on a holiday in the summer, but your budget only allows you to go on one trip, for example. But even then, there are ways to work around that. You can maybe figure out if it's a possibility to go with the three of you together, or you can maybe do 2 cheaper holidays, or that you can be creative with all these things. And I think there's a lot more possible than we tend to think. So I don't really worry about that a lot.
I'm absolutely agreeing with that. And just one joke that I remember. I have a lot of them silly jokes. Yeah, it's in an internet meme where a monogamous person, like this general monogamous person, is saying, "But I want your undivided attention." And a polyamorous person is looking them in the eye saying, "You couldn't handle my undivided attention." And that's a joke that my partners somehow love and appreciate. It's not because of my neediness, it's because of my energy, because I work several jobs and sometimes they get exhausted. But you can work with the people, definitely. Get together and work, and you can do a lot of wonderful different things in all the different constellations, or sometimes very separately. So I feel like when it's like this ecosystem, then it adjusts to the needs of the creatures that are in it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And of course, at the same time, incompatibility also exists. And I think that polyamorous people are probably very aware of that and very honest about that. I think that when we go on a date with someone, we are more inclined to already have that conversation about, okay, what are you going to need from me and what do you expect from this relationship? What are your expectations? Do you expect to see me every day of the week? Because that's not going to be possible for me. So I think we are very used to having all those conversations at a very early stage of the relationship. And I think this is a big difference from monogamy, where there is a lot of unexpressed expectations. And maybe people get disappointed later on because they feel like, oh, but I was sort of expecting us to move in together at some point, or, you know, I was expecting to see you this many days of the week. I think for everyone, whether you're monogamous or polyamorous, it's very important to explicitly discuss these things so that you can, in an early stage, sort of settle if you are compatible or not. And if you're not compatible, if for some reason you are incompatible, there can be many reasons, then maybe it's better to move on and stop dating right there. Yeah.
This is so exciting for me because, you know, this is what actually shows that there are always things that we can learn from each other, you know, from each other's experiences. Even though something might seem strange to us or unknown or whatever, there are always parts that we can take for ourselves. Because I believe that there is a huge problem with monogamous relationships where there are too high of expectations from the other person very often. And the expectation is that the other person has to meet all my needs, but no person can meet all my needs and doesn't have the obligation to do so. So it seems like, you know, there is a greater awareness with polyamorous person that the other person doesn't have to meet my needs or they don't have to meet my needs right now. Is that right? Do I have the right impression?
Yeah, for me, in theory, one of the biggest lessons, I think, one of the biggest lessons I learned from polyamory is to start, for me, the starting point of a relationship is not something that I want. Like, I want to have this kind of person in my life and I'm going to look for them. And as soon as I find them, like my Prince Charming, there he is, he's going to tick all the boxes. Here we go. For me, it goes completely the opposite direction, where I just meet someone and I get to know them and I sort of figure out as we go, okay, what is our match? How do we interact? What is our chemistry? What do I want with you? How many times do I want to see you? Do I want to introduce you to my parents or not? Do I want to spend Christmas with you? Do I want to have sex with you? Do you want to have sex with me? It's more of an organic process that really starts with the connection rather than with the expectation or with the sort of how do you say that? Like the sort of image or fantasy that we have that we want to achieve. Like, I want this kind of relationship. You see it a lot in dating shows where people say to the camera, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that, I'm looking for this kind of relationship. I want to live together. I want to have 3 kids and a dog. Yeah. And I think that's such a shame because as soon as someone doesn't live up to all those expectations, they are cast away. They are sort of taken for granted or the dating ends right there. Where I like to, go from or start from who are you and what is our connection and what do I get from you? What do you get from me? What do you like about me? What do I like about you? Etc. Yeah.
And I have a comment about those conflicts of interest because one thing that is strongly influencing me is closet. Because some of my partners are closeted. I have been living closeted life for majority of my life. And then some people are unaffected by that. And when we discuss, it really looks ugly to me myself, dragging my partners who are not closeted, dragging them to the closet, because there is no good way, to live in the closet, to create balance when you live part-time in the closet. And that's really, really ugly to drag people in the closet. And when they don't feel happy about it, it's not that I say that's the agreement or you either take it or go. We are kind of going through that together, through the struggle together, and we communicate about it. We feel feelings about it. And even though it's me kind of inflicting that on them, or sometimes they are inflicting something on me, we kind of, we go about it, not in the way, oh, that's conflict of interest, we need to split or whatever, but we say, yeah, that sucks. I feel you here, and what can we do about it? Maybe there's something I haven't thought of. Maybe there is something that we can, compensate for, or, do something else. You never know. But it's all this process of living and caring.
Well, one thing that also was on my mind, but I didn't get a chance at the workshop to ask, is the part that relationship is a lot of work. How do you see that? I mean, you said that you have to talk about things, and that's one thing that you learn, that you have to communicate well with each other to make this work. Where do you find the time?
I get the question, but at the same time, I think that part of this question, again, comes from this already sort of preset idea that we have about what a relationship is. And that we think about the monogamous relationships that we know of in our lives, maybe the ones that we have been in ourselves, or the ones that we know from our parents or family members. But it's not like I have 6 monogamous relationships at the same time, like 6 full-time. The relationships are definitely full-time because they are always there. Like every minute of the day I am in those relationships. But for example, when it comes to spending time together, I live together with one of my partners, but I only spend a few days a week with my other partner, or sometimes we only see each other once in 2 weeks, for example. It's really a matter again of communicating what you need and how often you want to see each other. But I find the time, by living it and by sort of going with the flow in a sense. That I think that's how it works for me.
Yeah, and in a way, I think like when something feels exhausting or like something that you cannot take, I think a very healthy way to approach it, and something I try to do and something I ask other people to do is not to do that. If that is not something you can do at the moment, not something you feel good doing at the moment, we can often postpone if there is something that needs to be spoken of. But it needs to be kind of some transparent postponing so that people are not put on hold. But I feel you need, I know you need. I don't have any capacity for it right now, or I don't have the capacity for it right now. That's also possible. So a lot of things are possible. And in a way, you are wired for relationships like this when you are maybe interested, for finding those very different solutions.
Maybe there's a struggle with having all these relationships at the same time when we talk about time management and stuff like that, and energy and things like that. But at the same time, I think there's also the answer there. Because, for example, when I need a shoulder to cry on, or when I need a partner to listen to my sorrows, there's always someone that I can go to, Yeah, so I think there's also a lot of solutions in having multiple partners. if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I want to come back to Lyoshka, what you said about this, that you can park things. This is actually a great also solution, I would say, coming from nonviolent communication, which I'm a trainer of, and which is an important part of how we can stay non-violently connected, or in a nonviolent communication, is that we are honest about how we feel. And sometimes we just can't walk or work out some things and need some time, and we can park it. But it's important to be transparent and say, can we park it until then? Because it's going to continue nagging. So I think that's a great suggestion for anyone, for any relationship. Great idea to do, and it makes things much easier, because often when we go into things and try to solve them right away and we are not ready, then it's not a good solution, and often we don't come to the place that we really want to. So thank you for mentioning that, and I think that's really helpful for definitely everyone. Okay, so let's go a little bit into your personal stories, if that's fine. To tell me a little bit about how you came to know that you're polyamorous. How was that process for you? Especially, you both talked about your faith background, so I'm also interested how you connected these two things, how this worked out for you.
Yeah, faith background definitely was there. And I think it took me quite some years or even maybe decades to get there, because this concept of polyamory was not there in the culture anywhere. And if it would have been, I believe I would have known maybe already at the age of 16, when I was in 2 international camps. It was a very active summer, and I fell in love with quite some people at those camps. And at this point, I conceptualized it as being like unsure, maybe like wanting to be in love and being unsure. And that's pretty funny, because when I thought about it now, I thought, okay, 2 people from this period are still there in my life, very much present. So it's this real thing has been going on. And then after that, at the age of 18, I left the town of my parents. I went to the university, and of course there was plenty of connections and plenty of beautiful crushes there. And still I thought maybe I'm unsure or whatever. I didn't conceptualize it as such. And after quite some time, I was used to all those light crushes I used to have. I have like light crushes all the time. I think I'm pretty much wired into plenty of romantic relationships or plenty of romantic attractions. And then at some point I met a person with whom it was not looking like a crush. It was a feeling, this ground is sacred. I really need to take my sandals off and to marvel at it. And then it took us quite some years, to figure out this relationship, because it was so unusual gender-wise, and I was not sure it was the right thing to do. I believe, I remember myself praying to God, if it's hurting the other person, if it's not the right thing, please take care of it somehow, in the most caring way for the other person. But if it's only possible, please let us stay together. And when God let us stay together, and I was happy, and I was so full and so deep in this relationship, it was something I breathed, and something that influenced my life so much. When we were a decade into this relationship, I had this feeling again with another person who was very tangibly present in my life. This is a sacred land. I need to take my sandals off. And it was different. I did not compare them. And all the culture says to you something has to be wrong with one of your relationships, or with your primary relationship, if something like this happens. Or if it's not, then you have to cast it aside somehow, to stay in the choice that you have made. And I tried to do that. And when I tried to do that, I felt I will be casting aside a very alive part of myself, something that my conscience does not see as sin, something that my conscience is very happy with. And I didn't know what to do. I believe I prayed again. I believe I was very confused. And I also had those two people in my life whom I trusted and whom I would trust my life with. And I chose to share this mess with them, to talk to them about it. And I was absolutely not knowing what those talks will be. I just wanted to share the truth about what is going on, to share the confusion. And all of a sudden, the person I have loved for over a decade just so easily embraced me in it and said, but it's so natural. That's the best person, among our friends. That is such an incredible person, the best friend we have ever had. And it's so natural. If you would not meet me, you would meet them, for sure. This talk was not a solution, nothing like that. It was, just being embraced, being understood, being felt in what was there for me. And then I talked to this other person who was so tangibly there in my life. And I was sharing my truth. I was listening to their truth. And their truth was that they felt strongly for me and they wanted a person who would be their own in their life. And this was, I didn't feel any frustration about it because that was their truth. I was sharing mine, they were sharing theirs. And it was such a natural experience for me, such a real experience for me to have. And at the same time, it was also very scary because when you don't have any positive examples, anything in the culture, you don't know how to call it, you don't know how to be around it. And then you think, okay, maybe if I'm too close, then I'm hindering the other person's possibility to find somebody who would be totally their own and things like that.
Yeah.
And this was really very unsure time, but I think that this trust I was having to the people in my life, to God that was driving and guiding this life, and to myself, I think it really helped. And then the next thing that happened was me being strongly introduced into the conversion, because I remember when we met, the partner of the person I was so deeply in love with, they kept asking me, are you okay? How are you with this? And I was so overwhelmed with joy because I wanted for them to be happy. I was seeing them being happy. And it is such a beautiful and such a lucky story for me, how I got introduced into polyamory. And when I asked permission to share the story, I'm so grateful to all my dear people who have allowed me to share those stories. The person that I owe my getting to know I'm polyamorous told me, and will you also share how much I doubt that the polyamory as a concept is working? And then we laughed and I said, definitely, absolutely, because that is how life is. And it's not a problem, it's not a frustration, it's not something that is there to hide. It's wonderful, you introduced me to the life I'm enjoying living, and and I so enjoy you living your life you're enjoying living. When I talk about it, I say that I have a life partnership that is very important for me, And I have several mutually loving relationships that are framed very differently, from romantic relationships to friendships. Maybe one more thing that is very important for me is really this gray area or not gray area. To love people, I don't need them to be polyamorous if they kind of consent to me loving them, and to me feeling romantic about them, and to me feeling very respectful to the choices they make in their life. Enjoying them loving their partners who are like totally exclusive, and it's like really all the variety, all the rainbow of possible relationships in my life, and I enjoy it very much, although it's not all just rainbows because rainbow comes out when it has been raining and it rains quite a bit as well. What about you,
Thank
Franz?
you.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying does resonate with me. So, for me, I had my first relationship 6.5 years ago with Matthijs, who is still my partner, and we live together here in this house. And when we started dating and when we started our relationship, for me, it was very clear that of course, we were going to be monogamous. I never thought about any other options. For me, polyamory was something I was not familiar with at all. And Matthijs always stated from the start on that he was not sure if he wanted to be monogamous. But then the only alternative that we talked about was having an open relationship. So that revolved a bit more around maybe having some sexual encounters outside of our own relationship, but not so much romantic partners. And then Manoy came into my life, and Manoy and Matthijs already knew each other a bit through the same dating app that I had met Matthijs on. And Manoy was already very much into polyamory. They had read a lot about it, and they knew all the theory, and they were really sure about being polyamorous, and they sort of fell in love with me and Matthijs, and with us as a couple. And then, for me, that was really confusing and scary. I was kind of like, what is happening? Are you trying to steal my boyfriend, who is apparently my possession, for you to steal? But then we met up anyway, and I sort of gave Manoy the benefit of the doubt, and we went to this club here in Amsterdam with the three of us. And it was very cute. We sort of ended up late in the evening or late in the night, ended up dancing with the three of us in like one big loving hug, where at some point I didn't even know whose arms I was touching and who was touching me. And that was a very beautiful moment. And for me, that was a big victory, I think, because up until that point, I never saw myself capable of something like that, because I was really strongly believing in monogamy. A beautiful connection evolved from that moment on with me and Manoy. And at first I considered them to be a good friend, but then at some point people started asking us, are you two dating? Are you two in a relationship? And then we looked at each other and we were like, maybe we are. We don't really know. But it was very clear to us that there was a very strong connection there, and a lot of love, a lot of mutual love. And at some point it was just undeniable that it felt like something that it felt to us that the word friendship didn't do justice to what was there, to the love and the connection that was there. And so I sort of found myself being caught up by my own reality, and I found myself in a polyamorous situation where I thought that I would never have that, because I didn't really see that for myself. But Manoy was also because they were already very familiar with the whole concept, and they knew about all the all the theories, but also all the sort of how do you say this in English? Well, anyway, they were very
works.
They were very aware of all the dynamics and all the things, which was very helpful, and also a bit challenging, I think, for them, because they also fulfilled a bit the role of the mentor, I guess, where I had to be taught a lot still, and that was, I think, very hard for them, especially in the beginning, but it grew to be something very equal. And so now I'm in this V that I described earlier on with both of them, with Manoy and Matthijs. If you would have told me about this when I started my relationship with Matthijs 6 years ago, I would have never believed you. And I think part of that is because I was super insecure at the time. So even the thought of being open, like being not monogamous, was very scary to me, because I always thought that it would mean... I was always afraid that I would lose my partners, that I would lose Matthijs, and that he would find someone else who was more attractive or more handsome or sexier than me. And I think polyamory and this whole process that we went through with Manoy and with the three of us, and also me separately with two of them, has helped me so much in gaining more confidence and sort of learning to trust, to really trust and believe in the relationship that is there, and also believe in myself, rather than believe or trust in the rules that I've set up. Throughout this whole process, I really learned to let go. So to let go of the rules, let go of the walls that I had built up around my partners that sort of imprisoned them, I guess. Just letting go and trusting the process, and trusting the relationship, and trusting myself. That has been a beautiful process for me, with a lot of self-discovery and a lot of love. And I really resonate with I really recognize what Lyoshka said about the compersion. So to give a bit of definition, compersion is a word that we use, which is kind of the opposite of jealousy. So it's sort of the explosion of love and joy that you feel when you see your partners being happy, or even when you see your partners engaging with each other or being intimate with each other. I have felt that several times, and it's the best feeling in the world. So right now I'm at a really relaxed place with the three of us. We went on our first holiday together last summer, which was very nice. All three of us are just very free to live our lives and to date if you want to date, and to meet new people. And all these trust issues that I used to have, and all these sort of attachment issues where I wanted to sort of claim my partners and hold on to them as if they were my own possession. If I look at my situation right now, all of that is far behind me, and that is a big relief. I'm really happy with the place that I am in right now. So that's the short version of my story.
Thank you, dear listeners and viewers, for being with us, for watching this. As always, the links for this topic will be in the podcast description. This podcast was made in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. Subscribe, like, comment. Of course, I would encourage you to be respectful. And just suggest this podcast to other people, that they listen to it, that people that might find this helpful.